The marketplace was noisy with shouts, alien merchants calling out their goods, and the smell of strange food in the air. The human walked through slowly, keeping his head low. He was used to the stares, used to the whispers that followed him. Humans were rare here, and most people did not trust them. Some thought humans were weak, others thought they were dangerous. Either way, he was always alone. That evening, as the sun was sinking and the light turned red across the sky, he saw something unusual near the edge of the market. A small figure sat on the dusty ground, half hidden behind a broken stall. At first, he thought it was just another beggar, but when he came closer, he saw it was a child. Her skin had a faint silver glow under the dim light, her hair thin and tangled, and her eyes far too large for her small face. She looked fragile, almost like she would break if someone touched her. Her hands were pressed to her stomach, and she trembled every few seconds. The human stopped, his chest tight with unease. He had seen hungry people before, but this girl looked like she hadn't eaten in days. Around them, people passed by without even glancing at her. Some noticed her, but quickly turned away, muttering as if her presence was shameful. He crouched down slowly, careful not to scare her. "Hey," he said gently. She flinched at the sound of his voice, her wide eyes darting to him with fear. He could almost see her deciding whether to run or stay still. "I'm not going to hurt you," he added. His voice was calm, soft. From the bag slung across his shoulder, he pulled out a small piece of bread he had bought earlier. He broke it in half and held it out toward her. The girl's nostrils flared. She smelled the food, but her body did not move. Her fingers gripped the dirt beneath her, as if she was scared it might be a trick. The human waited, arms stretched out, letting the bread rest in his palm. Minutes passed. Finally, her hand shot out, quick as lightning, snatching the bread. She stuffed it into her mouth so fast that crumbs fell down her chin. Her throat moved as she swallowed desperately. Then, without even asking, she reached for the second piece. He gave it to her without hesitation. She ate like a starving animal, but when the last bite was gone, her movements slowed. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. She looked at him again, this time not with fear, but with confusion. Her lips parted, and a strange sound came out before she spoke clearly. "You want a wife, don't you?" she asked suddenly. The human blinked, completely taken aback. That was the last thing he expected. "What?" he asked, his voice sharper than before. "My mother," the girl said, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. Her eyes were serious now, brighter with a kind of wild hope. "She's perfect for you." He froze. His heart skipped, and he wondered if he had heard correctly. He had only given food to a hungry child. How did this turn into talk about marriage? Around them, people continued walking by, but it felt as if the world had gone silent. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Why would you say something like that?" The girl tilted her head, her thin hair falling across her face. "Because you're kind. No one else gave me food. No one even looks at us. But you did. My mother needs someone like you." He felt a chill crawl down his back. This could be a trap, he thought. He had heard stories of humans tricked into bad situations, used as tools by alien families desperate for survival. But when he looked into the girl's eyes, he didn't see trickery. He saw desperation. He saw a child who had no one else to turn to. Still, the words she had spoken made him uneasy. He did not come here searching for a wife, let alone an alien one. He only wanted peace, to live quietly without drawing attention. Yet now, after a single act of kindness, this girl was pulling him into something far larger than he understood. She stood up shakily, brushing dirt from her knees. Her clothes were worn thin, patched in places, and far too big for her small body. She looked at him with a strange kind of trust, as if the decision had already been made. "You will come," she said softly, not as a question, but as a statement. "You will meet her. You'll see." The human swallowed hard, staring at her. His instincts told him to walk away, to forget about her words, and return to his lonely room. But something deep inside him whispered that if he left, he would never forgive himself. He watched as she turned, walking toward the narrow alleys beyond the marketplace. After a few steps, she looked back, waiting for him. The choice lay heavy on him. He could still leave now, still pretend this never happened. But his feet began to move on their own. He followed slowly, his eyes scanning the crowd, half expecting someone to stop him. But no one cared. To them, he was just a human, unimportant. They didn't know that in that moment, his life had already begun to change. The girl led the way, her small figure moving with surprising certainty despite her weakness. She glanced back once more, and this time, when their eyes met, there was something almost frightening in her expression. It was not fear, not hunger anymore. It was determination. He realized with a sharp twist in his stomach that she truly believed what she had said. To her, this wasn't a joke or a mistake. To her, he was meant for her mother. And though the human tried to tell himself it was nonsense, a part of him couldn't shake the feeling that he had just stepped into something that would change everything forever. The girl's footsteps echoed lightly on the stone path as she led him away from the busy market. The human followed at a short distance, uncertain, his mind racing with questions. The words she had spoken still rang in his ears. "My mother is perfect for you." He wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it, but something in her voice had carried weight, something that made him hesitate. She walked with purpose, though her small body seemed fragile and tired. Every few steps she glanced back, as if checking that he hadn't vanished. The narrow streets grew quieter, the crowd of the market fading behind them. The walls here were older, crumbling in places, and shadows stretched long under the setting sun. Finally, the girl stopped at a broken fountain, its basin filled with nothing but dust and dead leaves. She sat down on the edge and looked at him seriously. Her large eyes were steady, too mature for her small face. "You don't believe me," she said. He crossed his arms, leaning against the wall. "You think I would believe a stranger's child asking me to marry her mother?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You gave me food. No one does that here. You didn't look away like the others." "That doesn't mean I'm looking for a wife," he muttered. He rubbed the back of his neck. The last thing he needed was more attention. He knew the colony's rules. Humans were tolerated, but only just. Any connection with them beyond trade or labor was frowned upon. If the wrong people heard what this girl was saying, it could mean trouble for him, maybe worse. But she didn't back down. She is alone. Everyone turned against her. They call her cursed. But she is strong. She raised me with nothing. She is still kind, even when people spit at her. The girl's voice trembled, but her eyes held steady. "You're strong, too. Different. That's why she needs you." The human sighed, his chest heavy. He could see her desperation. This wasn't a child's silly idea. She truly believed this, maybe even planned it. That made it harder to dismiss. He lowered his voice. "Do you even understand what you're asking? Do you know what happens if your people see a human with one of their women? It won't end well for me, or her." The girl's small fists clenched. "They already hate us. It doesn't matter anymore. My mother doesn't laugh. She doesn't smile. Every day, I see her eyes go darker. If someone doesn't come, she will fade." Her words struck him harder than he expected. He turned his head, staring at the empty street. He had lived a long time avoiding other people's problems. He knew kindness often brought danger. Still, the image of the girl, starving in the market, gnawed at him. If her mother was in the same state, could he really just walk away? "Why me?" he asked finally, his voice low. "There must be others of your own kind, someone stronger, richer, safer." Her answer came without pause. "Because they won't. They already judged her. They already judged me. Only someone like you can stand with us. You don't fear what they say. You act with your heart." Her certainty unsettled him. He wanted to argue, but the truth was he had acted with his heart. That was how she ended up eating his bread. That was why he was still standing here, listening. The girl slid off the fountain and walked closer. She tilted her head back to look up at him. "You will see her. Just once. Then you can decide." He studied her face. It was small, dirty, and stubborn. She reminded him of someone who had lost too much too young. He exhaled slowly. One meeting. Nothing more. Relief flashed across her face, though she quickly tried to hide it. She nodded. "Follow me." They walked further into the quiet part of the colony. Houses here were not homes of wealth, but of the abandoned and forgotten. Doors hung crooked, windows were shattered, and silence filled the alleys. The human felt the weight of unseen eyes. Somewhere, someone was always watching. His every step felt louder than it should. The girl pointed ahead at a crumbling stone dwelling with a roof patched in many places. "That's where we live," she whispered. Her voice held a strange pride despite the ruin. He stopped several paces away, unease curling in his gut. He hadn't even stepped inside, but he could already imagine what sort of life they lived. Poor, desperate, shunned, and now dragged into it him. The girl turned to him with hope shining in her face, a fragile hope that scared him more than anger or hatred ever could. Please, just meet her. You'll understand. He wanted to refuse, to turn back before he crossed the line, but his mouth would not form the words. Instead, he stood there, frozen between reason and instinct, staring at the doorway that led to a woman he did not know. Yet somehow, he felt as though he had already stepped onto a path with no return. Behind the cracked walls of that home was not only her mother, but perhaps the beginning of something larger, something dangerous. Still, when the girl reached out and gently tugged his hand toward the door, he didn't pull away. He let her lead him closer, heart thudding, mind full of warnings, yet with a strange curiosity he could not silence. Whatever waited for him inside, he knew it would change his quiet, lonely life forever. The door creaked when the girl pushed it open, the hinges crying like an old wound. The human hesitated on the threshold, his eyes adjusting to the dim light inside. The air smelled faintly of smoke and herbs, but beneath that was another scent. Loneliness, heavy and sharp, like a place forgotten by the world. The house was small, barely more than 2 rooms. A thin curtain separated one space from the other, and a single lantern flickered weakly on a table. He saw cracked walls patched with cloth, a floor swept clean but worn from years of footsteps. There was no sign of wealth, no decoration, only survival. From behind the curtain, movement stirred. Then she appeared. The girl's mother. She was taller than he expected, her frame strong even under the weight of hardship. Her silver-gray skin shimmered faintly in the lantern light, and her hair, darker than her daughter's, was tied back roughly. But her face carried lines of sorrow etched deep into her expression. Eyes that once might have been full of pride now looked tired, guarded. The girl ran to her. "Mother, he came," she said, her voice full of excitement. The woman's gaze lifted to the human, and the room grew colder. Her eyes narrowed, sharp as blades, studying him from head to toe. There was no warmth in them, only suspicion. The human shifted uneasily, but did not look away. He had felt stares like this before, but something about hers cut deeper. It was not hate, exactly. It was fear mixed with disbelief. The woman's voice was calm, but firm when she spoke. "Why is there a human in my house?" The girl clutched her mother's hand tightly. "He helped me. He gave me food. No one else would." The mother's eyes flickered, a shadow of guilt crossing her face, but she did not soften. She stepped closer, standing tall in front of the human. "You should leave. Whatever you think you are doing here, it will only bring trouble." Her words were sharp, but he heard something hidden in them. She wasn't only protecting herself. She was protecting him too. "I didn't come here on purpose," he said quietly. "Your daughter insisted." The girl's grip tightened. "Mother, please. He's not like the others. He's different." The woman's face hardened, but her eyes betrayed a storm inside her. She turned away, walking back toward the table. "Different or not, he cannot stay. You know what they'll say if they find out. Do you want them to come here? Do you want them to take you?" The human's heart sank. So the rumors were true. This family lived under the constant threat of being cast out, maybe worse. The girl's voice cracked. "They already treat us like we don't exist. What difference does it make? He's the only one who helped." The mother closed her eyes for a moment, her shoulders trembling. For the first time, the human saw her weakness slip through the cracks. She had built a wall around herself, but her daughter's words struck at its heart. Finally, she turned again, her gaze resting on the human. This time, there was less hostility, but no trust either. "Why? Why did you help her?" He paused, unsure how to answer. 100 reasons circled in his mind, because he pitied the child, because he knew what it felt like to be ignored, because walking away had felt impossible. But the words that came out were simple. Because she was hungry. The room went silent. Even the lantern flame seemed to still. The mother's lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to speak, but she stopped herself. She turned away again, but her voice was softer when it came. "You should not return here." The girl looked at him with wide, pleading eyes, but the human did not argue. He understood the warning. This was not a place for him, not a future he should step into. He bowed his head slightly, then turned toward the door. As he reached it, though, he felt something strange. A pressure, like eyes on his back. He glanced over his shoulder. The woman was watching him. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes told a different story. They were not cold anymore. They were searching, almost questioning, as if she wanted to believe something, but was too afraid. He stepped outside, the night air rushing against his face. The girl ran after him, her small hands grabbing his sleeve. "Don't listen to her," she whispered fiercely. "She says one thing, but she feels another. You'll see." He crouched down, meeting her eyes. "You should listen to your mother. She wants to keep you safe." The girl shook her head stubbornly. "Safe doesn't mean alive. She needs more than safety. She needs hope." Her words carried weight far beyond her age, and it made his chest tighten. He stood slowly, glancing once more at the dark doorway. Behind it, the woman lingered, her shadow moving faintly against the curtain. She hadn't chased him out with violence, but her warning was clear. Still, that lingering look haunted him. As he walked away, the narrow streets seemed emptier than before. Whispers followed him now, faint voices from windows and corners. He realized people had seen him enter that house, and they would not forget. Every step he took, he felt the weight of unseen eyes. Somewhere in the shadows, someone muttered. He couldn't hear the words, but he knew what they meant. Trouble was already coming. The girl's sudden proposal no longer felt like a childish dream. It was a spark, and sparks could set fire to dry wood. He sensed it now. His simple kindness had tied him to something far larger, something dangerous. When he finally reached his small quarters at the edge of the colony, he closed the door and leaned against it, breathing heavily. He wanted to believe he could just stay away, forget the girl and her mother, and return to his quiet life. But he knew himself too well. The image of her tired eyes, her guarded sorrow, the unspoken plea in her last glance, it would not leave him. And somewhere deep inside, he already knew he would return. The human tried to convince himself that he would stay away, but he found his feet carrying him back toward the old street again and again. At first, he told himself it was only to check if the girl was still alive. Then he told himself he only wanted to make sure they had enough food. But soon, he stopped lying, even to himself. He wanted to see them, both the girl and her mother. Each visit was small at first. He would bring a loaf of bread, a pouch of dried fruit, or scraps of meat from the market. The girl always ran to him with a smile that lit up her thin face. She would chatter nonstop, telling him small stories about the neighborhood, about the way other children mocked her, about her mother's quiet sadness. He listened, and though her words were sometimes heavy, the sound of her voice was bright enough to warm the silence in his heart. The mother, however, remained distant. Whenever he came, she would watch him with wary eyes, not her tall figure always between him and her daughter. But she no longer told him to leave. Instead, she would nod stiffly, accept whatever food or tools he offered, and then retreat into her corner of the room. It was not kindness, but it was no longer rejection. Days stretched into weeks. Slowly, the distance between them began to shrink. One evening, when he brought a broken lantern to repair, the mother actually sat beside him, handing him tools silently while he worked. Their hands brushed once, and she pulled away sharply, but not before he saw the faintest flush of color cross her cheeks. The girl noticed everything. "See?" she whispered to him later when her mother was not listening. "She's starting to trust you." He shook his head, but deep inside, he felt it too. Another day, rain poured down from the sky, and the roof of their small home began to leak in several places. Without asking, he climbed up, patching the holes with spare cloth and resin he carried. When he came down soaked, the girl laughed at his dripping hair. But what surprised him most was the way the mother handed him a dry cloth without a word. Her hand lingered for a moment too long as she gave it to him, and though her face stayed calm, her eyes betrayed something unspoken. Trust came slowly, like drops of water filling a cup. One drop at a time, but eventually enough to make it full. The human began to realize he wasn't just helping them survive. He was becoming a part of their lives. The girl had started calling him protector. She said it like a title, as if it gave her comfort just to say it aloud. He laughed at first, telling her he wasn't anyone's protector, but she refused to stop. Whenever he came, she would shout it proudly, "Protector!" The mother didn't stop her either. In fact, one evening when they were eating together, he caught her lips curve into the smallest smile at the sound of it. It was the first time he had seen her smile at all, and it struck him harder than any words could. But peace never lasted long in the colony. Neighbors began to notice. At first, it was just looks, eyes narrowing as he walked by, voices whispering behind doors. Then came the muttered insults, spoken just loud enough for him to hear. Human trash, they called him. Cursed lover. He tried to ignore it, but he could see the danger growing like a shadow. One night, as he left their house, he caught sight of two men standing at the corner of the street. They didn't move, didn't speak, only watched him with cold eyes until he disappeared into the dark. The next morning, the girl told him she had heard people outside their house at night, muttering cruel things. Her mother had stood guard by the door, a knife hidden in her hand. The human's chest tightened with anger. He wanted to protect them, but he knew too well how fragile his position was. If the whole colony turned against him, there would be no escape. Still, when he saw the girl's small hand clutching his tightly and the quiet strength in the mother's eyes, he knew he would never leave them. The bond grew stronger with each day. He began to repair their walls, bring better food, and even found small trinkets in the market to amuse the girl. Once, he carved a small wooden figure for her. She held it like it was a priceless treasure, showing it proudly to her mother. For the first time, the woman laughed, though it was a low, soft sound. The human almost didn't believe it had come from her. The girl clapped her hands. See, protector? I told you she just needed someone to make her smile again. But with each smile, each moment of warmth, the danger outside sharpened. The colony was not blind. Whispers grew into warnings. Once, when he entered the market, an old man spat at his feet. Stay with your own kind, the man growled. Another time, 3 young men blocked his path, their eyes full of malice. We see where you go at night, one of them sneered. Careful, human, that house is not yours. He said nothing, pushing past them, but their laughter followed him long after. That evening, when he arrived, the girl noticed the tension in his face. What happened? She asked softly. Nothing, he said, forcing a smile. Just noise. But her mother wasn't fooled. She looked at him for a long time, and in her eyes, he saw not suspicion this time, but fear. Not for herself, but for him. She knew the danger as well as he did. Yet when he tried to suggest staying away for a while, the girl clung to him, tears forming in her eyes. Don't leave us, she whispered. Please, protector. He looked at her mother then, waiting for her to tell him to go, to say it was safer that way. But she didn't. Instead, she lowered her gaze and whispered something so soft he almost missed it. Stay. That one word was enough. He realized in that moment that no matter the risk, he was no longer an outsider to them. He was part of their fragile world, and he would not abandon it. But deep in his heart, he also knew this fragile peace could not last. Someone, sooner or later, would try to break it. The night was quiet when he left their house, but the streets were not empty. Shadows moved ahead of him, blocking his path. 4 men stepped out from the dark, their faces hidden under hoods, but their eyes glowed faintly in the lantern light. He stopped, his heart steady but his muscles tense. He had known this was coming. Whispers and threats had been growing every day. One of them stepped forward. His voice was sharp, filled with disgust. Human, you've forgotten your place. You walk into a widow's home as if you belong there. Do you think our laws mean nothing? The human didn't answer. He kept his stance calm, though every part of him was ready for trouble. Another spat on the ground near his boots. Stay away from her. She is one of us, not yours. Your kind is meant to serve, not to touch what is ours. The words stung, but he refused to show it. I helped a starving child, he said quietly. That is all. They laughed, bitter and cruel. You think anyone believes that? We've seen the way the girl clings to you. We've seen her mother's eyes when you walk by. If you don't leave them, it won't just be words next time. He clenched his fists, but stayed silent. Fighting them here would bring the whole colony against him. For now, he had to endure. When they finally stepped aside, letting him pass, he walked away without looking back. But their laughter chased him through the empty streets. And he knew the warning was real. The next day, when he entered the market, people stared openly. Some shook their heads. Others whispered and turned away. A few muttered insults just loud enough for him to hear. The human ignored them, keeping his eyes forward, but he could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down on him. When he reached the small house, the girl ran to him as always, her smile wide. But her mother noticed the stiffness in his movements. She stopped him at the door. "What happened?" she asked. "Nothing," he said, forcing his voice steady. "Just talk." Her eyes narrowed. "Not just talk. I can see it in your face." The girl looked between them, confused. "What's wrong?" The human sighed. He didn't want to burden them, but hiding it was useless. "Men stopped me last night. They told me to stay away from you." The girl gasped, gripping his arm. "No, you can't leave us. Please don't." Her mother's expression darkened, a storm behind her calm mask. She closed the door, lowering her voice. "This is why I told you not to come. They won't stop. They will push until one of us breaks." He met her eyes, steady and firm. "I won't abandon you. Not her. Not you." Something flickered in her gaze then, a mix of fear and something else, something softer. She turned away quickly, but he had seen it. Days passed, and the tension only grew. Everywhere he went, he felt eyes on him. Whispers followed him like a shadow. Some called him cursed. Others mocked him as weak. But when he returned to their home, the girl's laughter and the quiet presence of her mother gave him strength. He refused to let fear drive him away. Then came the night of the confrontation. He had just left their house when 3 men blocked the alley ahead. This time they carried weapons, short blades glinting in the lantern light. "You were warned," one of them said. "Now you pay the price for ignoring us." The human stood firm. "I don't want trouble." "Then walk away and never return," the man snarled. He shook his head slowly. "No." The words hung in the air, heavy with finality. The men advanced. His fists tightened. He had fought before, and he would fight again if he must. But before anyone could strike, a voice rang out behind him. "Stop!" The mother stood in the doorway, her tall figure outlined by the lantern's glow. Her eyes blazed with fury as she stepped forward. "Enough!" The men hesitated, surprised by her sudden appearance. She walked past the human, placing herself between him and the blades. Her presence was commanding, stronger than he had ever seen. "He is under my protection," she declared. "If you want him, you'll go through me first." The men exchanged uneasy glances. One spat on the ground. "You shame yourself, standing with a human." "I have no shame in choosing who stands beside me," she shot back, her voice steady and sharp. The human stared at her, stunned. He had expected her to remain silent, maybe even push him away for his safety. But instead, she shielded him with her own body, daring anyone to cross her. The men muttered curses, but did not attack. They stepped back slowly, their eyes filled with hate. "This isn't over," one hissed before they vanished into the shadows. Silence fell. The mother turned to him, her eyes burning with both anger and fear. "You fool," she whispered. "Do you see now? You're already part of this. They won't stop until one of us is gone." The girl ran out, clutching his arm tightly, tears in her eyes. "Don't go," she begged. "Don't let them take you." He looked at her, then at her mother. He could have chosen to walk away, to leave the danger behind and return to a quiet, lonely life. But his heart had already decided. He placed his hand gently on the girl's head, then met her mother's gaze. "I'm not leaving," he said firmly. For a moment, her eyes softened, the walls around her heart cracking just enough to let something through. She nodded once, sharply, as if sealing an unspoken agreement. From that night onward, there was no turning back. Whatever storm was coming, they would face it together. The wind was sharp that night, carrying whispers through the narrow streets. The human sat inside their small home, his back against the wall, while the girl slept curled under a thin blanket. The mother sat opposite him, sharpening a small blade with steady hands. The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the faint scrape of metal against stone. He finally spoke, his voice low. "They'll come again." She didn't look up. Yes. Her tone was calm, almost too calm, but her eyes were shadowed by worry. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "You should let me leave. If I'm gone, they'll stop bothering you." Her hand froze for a second, then continued sharpening. "You think it would end with you? They've hated me long before you came. You only gave them another reason." Her words struck him like a stone. He had thought himself the cause of their trouble. But now he realized their suffering had been long and deep, and his presence had only uncovered it. "You can't fight them all," he said softly. At that, she finally looked at him. Her eyes shone with something fierce, something unbroken. "I've fought alone for years. I will not stop now." The human felt a pang of respect and sorrow. She carried herself like a warrior, even in her broken house. Yet there was something else in her gaze, something she would not say aloud. The night stretched on, and he dozed lightly. But the sound of footsteps jolted him awake. Heavy, deliberate steps outside the house. He sat up, eyes narrowing. The mother was already on her feet, her knife in hand. The door burst open, and several figures stormed inside. Lantern light caught their blades, their faces twisted with anger. "There he is!" one shouted. "Take the human!" The girl woke with a scream, clutching her blanket. The human sprang to his feet, ready to fight, but the mother stepped in front of him, her tall frame blocking their path. "You will not touch him," she said, her voice like steel. The men laughed. "You would protect a human over your own people? You truly are cursed." Her grip tightened on the knife. "If that is what I am, then so be it." One man lunged forward, but the human grabbed a stool and swung it hard, knocking the attacker back. The others snarled, spreading out to surround them. The girl cried out, clutching her mother's dress. The human stood shoulder to shoulder with the mother, his breath steady despite the danger. "I told you I won't leave," he said. She glanced at him, her eyes flashing with something almost like pride. Then she faced the intruders again. "You'll have to go through both of us." The fight broke out fast. The small room filled with chaos, shouts, the clash of wood and steel, the girl's frightened sobs. The human fought with raw strength, blocking blows, striking back when he could. The mother moved with precision, her blade flashing in the lantern light, her body shielding both her daughter and the human. One attacker managed to slash the human's arm, and pain shot through him. He gritted his teeth, refusing to falter. The mother drove her knife into another man's shoulder, forcing him back. Blood stained the floor, shadows flickered across the walls, and for a moment it seemed they might be overpowered. But then, suddenly, the intruders began to retreat. One clutched his arm, bleeding heavily. Another dragged his injured companion. "This isn't over," one spat, glaring at them before slipping out into the night. Silence fell again, broken only by the sound of the girl's quiet sobbing. The human dropped the stool, his chest heaving. His arm throbbed with pain, blood trickling down, but he stayed upright. The mother turned to him, her eyes wide with something he hadn't seen before. Fear not for herself, but for him. She stepped close, her hand hovering over his wound. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," he muttered, though the cut burned sharply. She tore a strip of cloth from her dress and wrapped it tightly around his arm, her fingers trembling. "You fool," she whispered. "You could have been killed." He looked at her, meeting her gaze. "So could you." For a long moment they stood close, her hand still on his arm, her eyes locked with his. The wall she had built around herself seemed to crack, just a little. The girl wiped her tears and looked up at them. "We're still together," she whispered softly. "That means we won." The mother knelt, pulling her daughter into her arms. "Yes," she said, her voice shaking. "We won, for now." The human sat down heavily, leaning against the wall. He knew this was not the end. They would return, stronger and angrier. But he also knew one thing for certain. He had made his choice. He was part of their family now, whether the colony accepted it or not. Later, when the girl had fallen back asleep, the mother sat beside him. The firelight danced across her tired face, but her eyes were softer than he had ever seen. "You should have walked away when I told you to," she murmured. "And leave you to fight them alone?" he replied. "I couldn't." Her lips pressed together, as if she wanted to argue, but she said nothing. Instead, she looked at him in silence, and for the first time, she didn't hide the emotion in her eyes. It was not trust yet, not love, but something that held the weight of both. The night grew quiet again, but it was a fragile quiet. Danger still lingered beyond the walls, waiting for its chance. Yet inside that broken house, for the first time, there was a sense of something unspoken, a bond forged not just by need, but by choice. The human leaned his head back, exhausted but alive. He knew the fight was far from over, but he also knew this. No matter what came, he would not abandon them. Not the girl, not her mother. Whatever storm awaited, they would face it together. The sun rose red the next morning, and the colony was already buzzing with whispers. News of the fight had spread like fire in dry grass. Everywhere the human walked, eyes followed him. Some were filled with disgust, some with anger, but all carried the same weight. He had crossed a line that no one forgave easily. By standing with the widow and her child, he had challenged their unspoken laws. When he returned to their home, the mother was waiting for him at the doorway. Her face was calm, but her eyes told the truth. She was worried. The girl clung to her side, her small fingers clutching tightly at her mother's dress. "They'll come again," the human said simply. The woman nodded. "Not just them. The council will want judgment." The word made his stomach twist. The council was the colony's voice, its law. And their law was clear. Humans had no place among them. If he stood before them, the outcome would not be fair. By afternoon, the summons came. Guards arrived at the door, their spears glinting in the sunlight. "The widow and the human will face judgment," one announced coldly. Neighbors gathered quickly, whispering, mocking, curious to see what would happen. The girl tried to cling to the human, her voice breaking. "Don't go. They'll hurt you." He crouched down, meeting her tearful eyes. "I'll be fine," he whispered, though his heart was heavy. "Stay close to your mother." The council hall was large, built of dark stone, its ceiling high and echoing. At the center, the council elders sat in a half circle, their robes flowing, their faces unreadable. The crowd filled the space around them, their murmurs rising like restless waves. The human stood alone in the center, the mother at his side. Her chin lifted proudly, though her hands trembled slightly at her daughter's shoulder. One elder spoke, his voice deep. "Human, you are accused of dishonoring our people by placing yourself in a widow's home, by fighting against your betters, and by spreading unrest. What do you say?" The hall grew silent, all eyes on him. His mouth felt dry, but he forced his voice steady. "I gave food to a hungry child. I stood with them when others tried to harm them. If that is dishonor, then I am guilty." A wave of murmurs swept through the crowd. Some sneered, others looked uncertain. The elder's gaze shifted to the woman. "And you stand beside him, even now. Do you deny your shame?" Her voice was clear, strong. "I deny nothing. He is the only one who showed kindness when the rest of you turned away. If you call that shame, then I will carry it proudly." Gasps echoed through the hall. No one had expected her to speak so boldly. Another elder leaned forward. "You would bind yourself to him? A human? You would bring his blood into ours?" His voice dripped with disbelief. The woman did not falter. "Yes." The word rang out like thunder, shaking the silence that followed. Even the girl looked up at her mother with wide, astonished eyes. The human felt his heart pound. He hadn't expected her to declare it so openly. His chest tightened with something he couldn't name: fear, pride, and something deeper. The council erupted in argument. Some shouted that such a union was forbidden. Others whispered that her words carried a dangerous truth. The crowd muttered restlessly, torn between anger and curiosity. Finally, the eldest of the council raised his hand, and the noise stilled. His eyes, old and sharp, fixed on the human. "Our law says humans are beneath us, but law also says that a widow may choose her protector, even against the will of others. She has spoken her choice." The hall stirred. The human realized what this meant. There was no punishment they could give without breaking their own rules. The elder's voice carried over the crowd. "Then by law, the human is bound to her house. He is no longer just a stranger here. He is her chosen." The words struck like a hammer. Some shouted in anger, others fell into stunned silence. The girl smiled through her tears, gripping the human's hand tightly. The human looked at the mother. Her eyes met his, steady and calm. In them, he saw no regret. She had chosen, and with that choice, their lives had changed forever. When they left the hall, the streets were alive with noise, some cursing, some whispering, some only staring. But none dared touch them now. The council's judgment was law, and to defy it would bring punishment even to the boldest. Back at their small home, the girl ran inside, her laughter ringing for the first time in months. The human stood in the doorway beside the mother, the air heavy with everything that had happened. "You didn't have to do that," he said softly. Her gaze lingered on him, unreadable. "I did, because it was the truth." He swallowed, unsure of what to say. But the warmth in her eyes, faint yet undeniable, told him more than words ever could. That night, as the girl fell asleep clutching her wooden figure, the human sat near the fire. The mother sat across from him, her expression quiet, but her presence no longer distant. There was no wall between them anymore. Outside, the colony would still whisper, still judge, still wait for them to stumble. But inside this small house, something stronger had taken root. Not fear, not shame, but a bond, fragile yet unbreakable. The human realized that the girl's strange words on that first day had not been foolish at all. When she had said, "My mother is perfect for you," it had seemed like a child's desperate hope. But now, sitting in the glow of the fire with the woman's calm eyes watching him, he knew she had spoken the truth all along. For the first time in years, he did not feel like an outsider. He felt like he belonged.